to say right at the outset, this is being recorded, so we can put it on social media. So I hope you're all okay with that. And in order to give the full screen to our speaker, please can you all turn off your videos and mute yourselves if you want to. And we've asked Eluned to speak for 20 minutes or so, and we won't go on longer than an hour anyway. So if you have a question, probably the most sensible thing to do, you could either turn off your mute and ask it, but actually it'll be easier to handle probably if you click onto the...
You muted yourself, Liz.
Yeah, right, can you hear me? Yes, I'm unmuted now.
Yes.
Okay, so are you all okay with that? So if you wouldn't mind removing your video for the moment. Everybody, I'll remove mine when I've introduced Eluned properly. Good, thank you all very much for coming, and particular thanks to you, Eluned, because it really is a very special occasion for the branch, which we remember Tudor Watkins every year, who, as you know, is the longest serving Labour MP we've ever had in this constituency. 25 years, quite a while. So this event was set up so that we, in memory of him, and usually we use it as a fundraiser for the party, but this year we've decided to use it as a fundraiser for Brecon and District Mind. And we have so far raised £150 for them, which we're very pleased about. And we're particularly appreciative to have you here, Eluned. And I don't know how many people know this, but you were the youngest ever person to be elected to as an MEP, and only the 5th woman from Wales to be elected to a full-time political job, I believe. So I read, and that is quite something. Anyway, now in your current role, where you have responsibility for mental health and well-being and the Welsh language, of course, it did seem particularly appropriate, since this is a fundraiser for Mind, to be able to hear you. So thank you very much indeed. You must be very busy at the moment, and we really do appreciate it. And congratulations too on being the top of the list for the regional Senate elections next year. That's very good news. So, right, and I'm quite happy just to hand over to you. I'll remove myself from this, and don't forget, everybody, when Eluned's finished speaking, or before, if you think of a question, do it on chat, and I should be able to see it. And if I don't take any notice, just unmute yourself and ask. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Well, diolch yn fawr, Liz, and thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you to Brecon Labour Party for inviting me to speak. Brecon Labour Party is always going to be special to me, because it's where the party first endorsed me as a candidate, as an MEP, when I was 27. And I'll never, ever forget and stop appreciating the faith that, you know, a really radical group of people put in someone who was then a 27-year-old young lady. A lot of water's gone under the bridge since then, but, you know, I don't think you can understand quite what a radical move that was. That it, you know, before that, only 5 women ever had been elected in Wales to a full-time public position, and certainly it was certainly not a young woman. So really, I'm still very, very grateful, and it was that happened in Brecon, and I'll never ever forget actually racing back from there, just thinking, wow, I've got a real shot at this. So thank you very much for that support and your ongoing support. And I'm very grateful to you for supporting me on the list. So it is absolutely appropriate that I'm speaking this evening at the Tudor Watkins Memorial speech. I've known about this for several years, of course, and I've heard great stories about Tudor Watkins, the way he used to go around little shops all around Brecon and Radnorshire, just buying little sweets here and there, just as an excuse to go and meet people. And I've taken that on board. So top tips from Tudor Watkins. And the other thing is, it's absolutely appropriate that I'm able to speak to you tonight as you are raising funds for Mind. And just to say that I've had an interest in mental health for a while now, and part of that was stimulated in Brecon and Radnorshire. And it was really because of the tragedy that happened in Llandrindod, Welsh, where I think within a space of a very short time, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, 3 young men took their own lives in that area. And that really led me to start a campaign with Mind to try and encourage people to pledge to talk to each other, because that is the absolute beginning of where you can start to improve your mental health issues. I think just to begin with, I'm only about 2 months into the job, so I'm still very much on a sharp learning curve. But it's absolutely right that the First Minister determined that this should now become a priority for the Welsh Government by appointing somebody to the Cabinet with responsibility for mental health. I don't think any of us would be surprised if we heard that the levels of anxiety during the pandemic have increased significantly. In fact, you wouldn't be human if you hadn't had a pang of anxiety at some point during this time. Of course, none of us know or knew whether we would catch the virus. None of us know or knew whether loved ones would catch the virus. So many people have been concerned about their jobs, about furlough, about the intensity of living and working together. And of course, that manifests itself in so many different ways, not least in terms of people being locked up in their own homes with people who perhaps wanted to do violence towards them. And we know there's been a significant increase in violence against women during this time. So I think the first thing to try and address is, look, how big a problem is this? Well, even prior to the pandemic, 1 in 6 people experience difficulties in terms of mental health at any one time. 1 in 4 of us will suffer some kind of mental health problems during our lifetime. At the moment, 1 in 6 children are suffering from some form of anxiety. And I think it's probably worth emphasising that the Wolfson Centre, which is a centre of excellence based in Cardiff University, probably one of the best places in the UK, that really looks at children and mental health. They have analysed and worked out that 80% of mental health issues develop when people were children or young. We've not got to forget that 1 in 10 new mothers suffer from postnatal depression. So we have to make sure that support is in place for them. And then, of course, we've got to remember older people, a different form of mental health issue, but in the number of people suffering from and living with dementia. So 1 in 16 people over 65 are living with dementia, and 1 in 6 people over the age of 80. So this is an issue that we can't ignore. It is absolutely something we must address. And just the other thing to bear in mind is that there are lots of vulnerable groups, of course, who really suffer in this space. Homeless people, 9 out of 10 prisoners have a diagnosable mental health problem or a substance misuse problem. And 950 people a day in Wales seek support from the public health sector for mental health. 300 of these are emergencies. So that was the situation pre-COVID. So just imagine the increase that has happened during this time. Pre-COVID, we spent £700 million a year on mental health in Wales. That's more than any other part of the NHS. And we're very proud that we managed to ring-fence that in a way that hasn't been done in England. And the other thing we've done even prior to the pandemic was to put in place a very cross-government comprehensive strategy to address the issue of mental health. Because we've got to understand that this is not just a medical issue. And I think that's a trap that many people fall into. All governments are expected to get involved in this issue. There's been an action plan to drive forward the 10-year Together for Mental Health plan. Every 2 years, that action plan is updated to respond to the current situation. And I think the other thing just to bear in mind is that there is still, to an extent, a stigma associated with mental health. One of the key things that we hope that we can do is to break down that stigma. There has been a UK campaign called Time to Change that recognises that we've got to get people talking about this. That is the first step towards addressing this difficult issue. In England, can you believe it? The Tory government, in the middle of a pandemic, have stopped that campaign, Time to Change. We in Wales are continuing our campaign, understanding that now more than ever, we've got to get people to talk openly about their mental health. So what are the causes of mental health? Well, they can be very, very varied. Of course, at some ends, there's a medical issue. There's a chemical imbalance of some sort. There are other medical issues that are extreme. But there are many, many other things that drive the mental health issue. Debt, poverty, and of course, those are issues that are emphasized during a pandemic where we're seeing a massive, massive downturn in terms of the economy and so many jobs being shed just this week in the retail sector. People who were already perhaps living on low salaries now being challenged to live on universal credit. Relationships is another issue that of course drives mental health, and Lord Layard is somebody who has written extensively about really what is it that makes people happy, and a lack of relationship is something that really causes a problem, and getting relationships wrong leads to mental health issues. Housing, living in damp, difficult, overcrowded housing can also of course lead to misery and depression. Unemployment of course is something that we are going to be staring at very, very hard for the next few months and possibly years to come. The fear for our children, we all worry about our children, what's going to happen to them. And of course, this is perhaps a more challenging time for them than ever. And then of course, there's loneliness. There's so many people now live alone. And during this pandemic, people have become increasingly isolated. And that is, of course, a challenge that we've had to try and overcome. And whilst it is possible for us to live on Zoom like we are doing now, there are people who don't have that access, who don't have that ability to technically be able to manage this system, or maybe be challenged with broadband issues, in particular in extreme rural areas. So where are we now as a result of COVID? Well, what we do know is there is increased additional demand. The Youth Parliament have done extensive research on this, and amongst young people, the rates of anxiety have hit about 60% amongst young people. We've had campaigns in the Welsh Government to try and measure what is going on within our society. We've had a campaign called How Are You Doing?, trying to really take the temperature of the nation. And it's clear that anxiety is significantly on the increase. We compare notes with our UK neighbours just to make sure that we are understanding what the trends are. And as a result of this, what we've done is to make sure that we have adjusted our Together for Mental Health strategy to update it to respond to the pandemic. And the very first thing we've done is to make sure that mental health services are considered essential. So when you've seen, and in particular at the beginning of the pandemic, we had to significantly cut back on the services that we were able to present in the NHS. We never cut back on mental health services because we considered them to be essential. And what we do know is that if you don't address mental health issues early, they are likely to become more complex and require more specialist services. The other thing, of course, is that we understand that there is a direct correlation between the economy and its performance and mental health. And the socioeconomic impacts of the pandemic on mental health has been significant. And we know that as the unemployment rates will continue to rise and as furlough will come to an end, we are likely to see an even greater increase in that area. And then the other thing we've done is to make sure that we support health boards to meet the changing health needs through the pandemic and understand that this issue is not going to go away, and to make sure that they are considering and putting in place longer term strategies in terms of recovery in this space. So what we've done is to not just spend 700 million on mental health services, but we've gone even further. We've put in even more money to support mental health, an additional £10 million to target very often the lower tiers, the easy access to mental health services, the support that can be given by the third sector. And there's some brilliant work being done in the third sector, in particular in places like Mind. I've got a lovely relationship with Mind in Ystradgynlais, and they keep me informed of what's going on there. Again, some dreadful stories in that area of suicides by young men, and that is an issue. We see the incidence of suicide much greater amongst young men than in any other category. So reaching out, getting men to talk is really important. And there's some great initiatives being undertaken in places like Ystradgynlais, working with the rugby club to make sure that they are able to talk in an environment where they feel relaxed. And if that is successful, we'll see if we can learn from it and roll it out elsewhere. We've also created an additional funding package of 2.2 million for a surge capacity, understanding that there is going to be a rush of demand in this sector, not just in terms of the low level, but also in terms of the acute level, the hospital care that is needed. And we've had to put in place additional resources to help people in hospitals. What we have learned during this pandemic is that there are new ways of dealing with some issues. And actually, this is a space where some people maybe are more comfortable to talk without, where they want to talk without being recognized, where they want to keep that anonymity. And so one of the things we've introduced is an online cognitive behavior therapy service called Silver Cloud. It's very new, but already about 3,000 people are using that, and we are encouraging people just to know it's there. You don't have to have a reference from your GP or anything. It's a service that we've paid for, and there's specialist support on it, and you can go at your own pace. So I do hope people will take advantage of that. And then we have a call center that makes sure that there is somebody there 24 hours a day, ready to take people's calls and to direct them, if necessary, to more specialist support. And we do need specialist support. And one of the things that I've come across recently amongst many young people in particular is an increase in eating disorders. And we need to understand that that is an increasing problem, in particular amongst young girls. We have understood that there is a particular problem amongst young people and children, and that's why we have developed a very comprehensive new approach to mental health within schools. So we now have a whole school approach. We spent £5 million on this, making sure that first of all, that the school workforce is supported, because there's a lot of pressure on them at this time as well. £450,000 being spent on supporting teachers because they are also going through a tough time, but also putting in place school counselling services on a scale that we've never seen before. So there's a huge amount of work still to do in this space, but of course we will be introducing now a new curriculum. And it's probably worth emphasising and pointing out that the new curriculum will have well-being and mental health as absolutely central to what it does. It's going to be a theme that runs throughout the curriculum, so that so that people will feel more relaxed about talking about the issue, and that we can give people tools in terms of how to deal with those issues. And again, it's not always medical. Sometimes people just have a rubbish life. They have really tough time at home, and what they need is just somebody to listen, somebody to talk to, and we need to make sure that we can provide that in a school setting. We've also gone further. We've done the same thing in relation to universities. £10 million has been put in place, not just to support people with mental health issues in universities, but also to recognise that actually many people depended on jobs to top up their ability to live as a student. And of course, many of those jobs have disappeared. So we've put a significant amount of additional money in to support people who may be suffering from financial troubles. FE as well, significant funding, about £2 million gone into further education funding to make sure that we can support them in their school place and in their learning facilities. And then the other thing we've got to bear in mind is that actually there are other more urgent issues, and one of the things that I'm very keen to do is to make sure that we give much greater support in terms of complex care. There are some people who have very, very difficult and complex care issues, and POIS actually is at the forefront of some of the work in this space. And very recently, I've been very pleased to sign off a proposal where we are going to have some crisis beds specifically for younger people based in POIS, one of the few centres in the whole of Wales where that will be available. The other thing to bear in mind is that there are vulnerable groups, people who perhaps are more vulnerable than others in the space of mental health, and who perhaps don't seek the support that they need. The BEN community in particular, Black and ethnic minorities, we know there's a big issue there, but they don't go and seek support. So we've had to frame a specific programme to try and get the information out to particular sectors of society through different mechanisms and methods and networks. And the other thing, of course, is prisoners. We need to understand that there's a particular issue with the support we need to put in place for prisoners. Crisis mental health is another area where we are putting a huge amount of work now, working with police, working with local authorities, and it's this cross-departmental, cross-government working that is absolutely critical in this area, because there's a danger that people get passed from pillar to post. It's not our problem, it's your problem, you deal with it. And the person in the centre just doesn't understand the way around the system. And we've got some really good models where that is not happening, and we're very keen to roll that out across Wales. So just finally, the probably most extreme and difficult point of mental health is suicide. And about 300 people in Wales take their own lives every year. And what we need to do is to make sure that the support is available before they get into that state. So about 25% of people who take their own lives have not accessed the support services that are in place for them. And so we're determined to see what we can do to get to those people. Many people suffer as a result of bereavement, and they can't bear living without their loved ones. And we need to make sure that that support is there. And again, we put significant funding and additional funding into bereavement support during this crisis. So mental health is something, and I've just come off a call now where we've been discussing the next Labour Party manifesto, and one of the things that we're very keen to do is to make sure that mental health is one of the areas where we focus our attention during the next election, an election where we hope once again Labour will be leading the government in Wales, making sure that we understand that it is our duty, our responsibility to make sure that we deliver for the people of Wales, protect the people of Wales, and follow the leadership that Mark Drakeford has offered during this pandemic, following the science, not responding in a knee-jerk fashion in the way that that Boris Johnson has done, consulting with people, discussing with people, trying to get an understanding of what's going on before putting measures in place. And so I do hope we can work together in that next election, and I hope tonight has given you an understanding of the kind of issues and kind of things that we can offer people in that next election. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful and informative. Do you have any idea, any measures of how much worse things have got during the pandemic?
Well, we do know that anxiety levels have increased significantly. And the issue for us now is to try and address those anxieties before they become more serious issues.
Yeah.
So we do know that that has increased significantly. And as I say, we've done a lot of polling, a lot of analysis. We've talked to, in particular, young people to get a sense of what's going on in their lives. And it is absolutely clear that the levels of anxiety has increased significantly. The issue for us now is this doesn't have to turn into a tsunami of a problem. You know, it may be that as the vaccine is rolled out, that those levels of anxiety will reduce. But we can't depend on that. And so what we're planning to do, and what we are doing already, is to put in that support at a low level, at a really early time, so that we're supporting organisations like Mind to offer really the kind of advice that is essential for people who are struggling at this time.
Thank you. Ros, I think you had a question or wanted to say something. If you'd like to unmute yourself, would you? Thank you.
Ros.
Go ahead.
Ros.
Yeah, hi Eluned, thank you. That was fascinating and very informative. So I work for Brecon and District Mind.
Great.
And I wear two hats. I'm the Mums Matter facilitator, but I'm also supporting the team in setting up a children and young people service. It's a new area that we're branching out into, which is very exciting and something that's very close to my heart. So we've been running a pilot scheme at the local high school since July. I'm from England originally and lived in Wales for 7 years, and I'm so thankful that I've lived in Wales through the pandemic for lots of different reasons. For example, I love the fact that that they got all the children back to school in July, even if it was just for a day or two. I speak as a mum as well. And during the time that the children were back at the high school, we went in and ran some workshops for the sixth form, found out what sorts of issues they were facing, etc. And then then sought to plan some workshops for September onwards to help them. So we haven't got much money yet to do it. So it's just a pilot. But as you've mentioned, anxiety was obviously a massive issue. So we've been running these workshops for the sixth form since September, which have been really well attended. They're optional. One of the great things is that lots of boys are attending, voluntarily. I've been really surprised at that. I was a secondary school teacher for 20 years before I took this job, and I know how difficult it is to reach young men and boys when it comes to mental health and well-being. So that's really positive. So the sessions we've been running, we've been looking at, you know, basic neuroscience, teaching young people how their brains work, why they feel anxiety, you know, the physiology of it. We've been delivering mindfulness techniques to the young people, all those sorts of things, and it's proving really positive and really you know, really worthwhile. What we've noticed and what we're becoming aware of, and again, I speak as somebody that taught for 20 years, so I wasn't really surprised to see it, is that teachers are, like lots of other frontline workers, really burnt out and really stressed. So we're now at Brecon Mind starting to specifically support teachers as well. So we're running inset days in the high school in January and things like that. So my question to you is, and you have sort of touched on it, is one of the key principles that we teach in the Mums Matter programme and in a lot of our other programmes is the idea that you can't pour from an empty cup. And a lot of frontline workers, their cups are very empty, not surprisingly. Yeah. So I suppose my question is really just around, apart from, you know, the money, etc. How do we go about filling up the cups of all our frontline workers? And I'm particularly concerned about teachers.
Thanks, Ros, and thank you for all you're doing with Mind. I think it's a fantastic organisation, and it's changing people's lives. It really seems quite strong in Brecon and Radnorshire. So I'm afraid I haven't been involved in the Brecon Mind, but I certainly have had contact with Stricken, as I say, and Llandod. I think that you know, the focus on children, young people, and also their parents, because I think that is important, because, you know, parents very often don't understand what is going on here, and we need to make sure that parents are communicated with as their children are going through this really difficult time. And, you know, I've made a point since being appointed to try and speak to people who are going through this, who are finding difficulties accessing services, just to try and get a better understanding of where the problems are. And quite often, communication is one of the issues. We just need to make sure that people understand how they get access to the system, where they get access to the system. And I think we're going to try and provide, and I'm hoping it's going to go up on Health Board's websites next week, a much clearer pathway for how you can access the system and where you access the system, and just to make sure that that's more visible for people. As I mentioned, teachers, I think, are absolutely central. And we have, as I say, put in place some support to make sure that teachers are given that support in school. So that should have started trickling through to schools already. And the other thing we're doing is making sure that when teachers are being trained, that they understand. So the new cohort of teachers will have those skills automatically because it'll be built into their training. But the new curriculum is going to be, you know, it's going to be quite an upheaval when it comes to the new curriculum. And £20 million has been put by to retrain teachers, to get them to understand that we need to do this in a different way, and to give them the tools and expertise that they will need to be able to manage a very different society from the one that we've been living with. I can see there's a question from Charlotte. Shall I go on to answer that? Is that any good? Liz?
Yes, that would be great.
Is that okay?
Yes. Can you? Yeah.
Charlotte's asking about local authority care and placements that are happening outside of Wales with, I assume, people who have quite complex cases. This is an issue that we're trying to address, and in particular when you live in a rural area, it's always going to be difficult to find specialists. And there's a kind of an expectation and understanding that if you want really specialist services, you are going to have to travel. Now, there's still a point, I think, where we need to make sure that there is a certain amount of provision within Wales. At the moment, I'm aware that many people from Powys who are in that situation have to leave the country. And that's why I think it's really welcome that Powys and mental health across the whole of Wales is being led by the Chief Executive of Powys Health Board. And she has a real understanding of this and has been the first to ask for some capital funding to make sure that those beds are available within Powys. So hopefully there will be an opportunity for people to use those and that they won't need to travel in the same way. And then David and Anne Scully's asked something about whether cancelling the exams will benefit young people's mental health. Well, as a mother who's got a daughter going through A-levels next year, I can tell you that there's been immense relief in our house as a result of cancelling those exams. I don't think that's going to work for everybody. There are some who are very disappointed that that's not going to happen. People perhaps who don't perform well in the classrooms, who actually perform better at exam times, and so and that tends to be people from poorer backgrounds and things. So we have to make sure that there's an understanding when people are going to be making those assessments, that that's built in. So I do think that that is probably something that on the whole will benefit younger people, but let's not forget that it would have been really difficult to hold those exams because of the difference that's going on in terms of how often people have been required to be in school. So in some schools, you know, they've been off for a couple of weeks, then they go back for a week, and then somebody else in their cohort contracts a virus, and then they have to be off for another couple of weeks. And I think there's a really unfair playing field then if it came to exams. So that's why I think that the Education Minister made that decision.
And also the pressure on teachers themselves?
Well, you're right. There is an issue about the pressure on teachers. I guess there'll be a slightly different pressure on teachers now because they will still have to do those assessments. And I think the problem at the moment in relation to teachers is we haven't got the clarity in terms of assessments yet. So we're very keen to get that clarity in place. I just think whenever there's a lack of clarity, there's an increased level of anxiety. And so that is something that I know that the Education Minister will want to put in place as soon as possible.
Thank you.
I can see something about prisoners' mental health. Yes, we are developing a women rehabilitation centre in Wales, which means that low-risk women don't have to go to prison in England, which will definitely help. And it's very heartening to see that the number of women taking their lives in prison is slowly coming down. Well, I do think that if you look at the number of people who have been suffering in prisons, if you're a long way away from your family, that is bound to put increased mental health pressure on you. And so I, like you, I'm very pleased that we will be seeing a women's centre. We're not calling it a prison, it's a rehabilitation centre, and we'll be very pleased to see that being established here in Wales. And of course, there will be provision for mental health support there.
Thank you. Thanks, Elena.
Right.
The lecture is very inspiring.
Yeah. Right. Any more questions? Anyone? No?
Yes,
I've
got my hand up.
Oh, sorry, I can't see.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Murray?
Hi. Thanks, Eluned, for a fantastic lecture. I just wanted to ask the question about support from Welsh Government for employers. On a daily basis, I'm seeing mental health go through the roof.
Yeah.
Every call I get from every member centres around anxiety, depression, and last week I had to deal with a gentleman who tried to take his life, sorry. sorry. So I was just wondering what what will the Welsh Government be doing to assist employers, so the bigger retailer employers, the ones that have been absolutely caned throughout this entire COVID process, trying to get them trained up and understand mental health, because the area that this gentleman came from, the managers in there, it's nothing to do with the KPIs, it's nothing to do with hitting targets, mental health. And that's how they see it. It's not in the forefront of how they want to deal with their employees. But yet every single one of those people on those tills, stacking shelves, doing deliveries, it is such a stressful situation. We need to be educating the employers. And I just wondered if there was anything that Welsh Government would be looking to push through. I know we are currently working on a neurodiversity toolkit, but that's for our reps, not for the employers. So just wondered what was out there at the moment. And sorry, I got a bit emotional about my men.
Oh, Marie, that's really dreadful to hear that. And, you know, it is such a difficult time for people. And, you know, this is quite a difficult job, because actually you're speaking to people every day who are in a really bad place. And I think we do have to make sure that we put that support in place. So we do have programmes in Welsh Government to support employers. In fact, there's one where 35% of employers in Wales have signed up to a mental health support scheme. It would be interesting to hear from you, Marie, in terms of GMB.
Yeah.
You know, is that working? Because my fear is it's probably not working as well as it should be.
No.
So
I think, Eluned, it's not so much that the scheme is there. That's amazing. It's the fact that these employers are not being made to sign up, would be the word. I mean, I think if they're going to be looking after their employees' mental health, then they should be said. It should be in the forefront, and it should be, look, we need you to sign up to this charter. We need to know that you are working with your employees, with the Welsh Government, to make sure that your employees' mental health and well-being is at the forefront of your employment policy, not as an afterthought. And I think the Welsh Government's, you were talking about, I was talking to Mike Payne around that. And both me and Mike are in agreement. It's a fantastic scheme, but how do we make these employers take part in it and actually sit up and listen? And that is the worry.
Marie, I'm going to see that as a challenge, and I'm going to make sure that I get in touch with the GMB and talk to them about this issue, about what else we need to do. You'll be aware that when it comes to funding economic support from the Welsh Government, that there is now a conditionality put on that. Mental health is one of the areas where we put in conditionality on it. So they have a responsibility to look after their own employees. And the other thing that people need to understand is that as businesses, it's not good for them. If people are suffering from mental health issues, they are more likely to go on the sick. In fact, the figure I've heard for Wales is that mental health is costing this country £7 billion a year. 7 billion. You know, the whole budget of the Welsh Government is about 14 billion. So, you know, this is not something that is nice to do. It's something we have to do if we are serious about supporting our economy, apart from anything else, apart from people. It's an economic issue as well. So we've built that conditionality in. The other thing that I've been very involved with in recent days, and it's been really, really difficult, is issues with the hospitality sector. So you can imagine it's very, very tough telling the hospitality sector that we are putting very, very strict restrictions on them. And, you know, there are people who are really, really struggling. They're struggling financially. And so the other thing I think we need to do is to put some support in for employers, you know, the people who are running the businesses, because they feel under massive pressure. You know, the furlough scheme is there for people who are employees, but you know, we need to make sure that we're putting some support around the employers as well, and that's something that I've been discussing today as well, because you know they're not in a good place.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any other questions? I don't think I've seen any others on the... Yes?
Liz, can I
Yes,
come in?
Rob, please,
Hi.
go ahead.
Hi, Leonard. Thanks very much for the talk.
Hi.
Very interesting. Regarding domestic abuse, a woman's aid rep claimed on BBC Wales yesterday there's been a very recent fatality linked to
Yes.
abuse. And it was claiming this is because it's not a refuge place to the victim. Can you comment on the issue of refuge places for women at the moment? Thank you.
Yeah, we have put significant support into women's refuges during the crisis. In fact, we definitely put about £10 million in very, very early on in the crisis, because we understood that being trapped in the same house as somebody who's beating you up for 3 months, is not a place that we wanted people to be. So we have put significant funding in to make sure that that support is there. Part of the problem is, giving people the confidence to know that they can leave, and we need to make sure that they understand that there is a refuge for them. But I'm not aware of there being a lack of refuge during this pandemic for women. And if you do know of something, I'd be very interested in hearing, because I think that would be a priority for the Welsh Government if we thought there was a gap there.
Thank you, Trish.
Thank you. Thank you.
Eluned, sorry, it's Trish Fretton here. I'll just see if I can start the video. I just wondered if you could comment, and it's just, sorry, it's my lack of knowledge really about what the Welsh Government's view is about homelessness. I just think that we haven't quite got it right, and I don't know if it's really true, but there's a kind of feeling that I've got that Powys did very well alongside other places in Wales initially to get people off the streets, and I think a lot of people very much welcome that, but I'm not sure that that's quite happening now. And as we're going into the colder months, and I've got a feeling that we've got quite a few empty properties around that perhaps we should be being a bit more creative about to make for homes for people. I just wondered if you could explain what the Welsh Government's view is on that. Thank you.
Well, I think it's been really fascinating to see what can be achieved when you've got the political will to do something about it. So we've had homelessness for years, but when the pandemic hit, we just thought, my God, if these people get it, that's it. It's game over for them. We need to get them off the street now. And we did. And we spent huge amounts of money, certainly 10 million in the first round, to get them off the streets, to put them into hotels. And what was the other benefit of that was that we were, for the first time, able to put packages of support around these people, because it's really difficult. They're on the street. How do you support them? But we could put the mental health support in place. We could start to talk to them about getting onto to benefits that may help them. So, but also substance abuse, putting some support in place on substance abuse. So it was really successful. And then, of course, things started to open up, and some of the hotels, wanted their beds back. Thank you very much. So we have though, because it's just not a good look for the Labour Party to see people go back on the streets. So we have put, again, significant additional funding into supporting people to keep off the streets. And I think it's not nearly as bad as it was before the pandemic, but the issue here is also about long-term support. We've got to get these people houses, homes. And, there's a real determination within the Welsh Government to give them long-term support. And that's why one of the things we've built 20,000 affordable homes in Wales in the past 5 years. It's incredible achievement. But, we always need to do more. So I can assure you that when it comes to homelessness, it is very much up there at the top of our agenda.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, we've got about just over 5 minutes left. Is there anyone else with a question? David?
I just wonder what we as a branch can do to be more supportive in general.
Wow. Well, I tell you what you could do is to tell people about what we're doing. And I think that's part of the issue with us in being in government in Wales, is that people have no idea about what we're actually getting up to. And if you can help us with giving out messages, then that would be excellent, and particularly in the run up to the election now. So one of the things that I've started doing now on my Facebook this week is I'm doing an advent calendar. So there'll be 24 days of Labour achievements. And it would be really good if you could have a look at those and share them and let people know the information that's contained in there. Because very often what we find is that you know, people don't know what to say to people when they're trying to convince people to vote Labour. But you should have a lot of information coming at you, one a day from now until Christmas.
Well,
Great.
that is fantastic. Thank you very, very much. We look forward to it. And I think one of the issues is perhaps communication, and, you know, how do people access some of the services you've been talking about? There's a whole lot of stuff there, isn't there, which is really vital. Well, we look forward, I'm sure, all of us, to our Advent calendar. Thank you. And just really, everybody's been saying thank you on chat. I've got 2 messages here now, but thank you so much for coming. All right, yes, we want to check out your Advent calendar. Thank you so much for coming. You must be so busy right now, and it really, really is fantastic for us to hear from you so much about what you're doing and what's going on. And, you know, just thank you for your time and for your work, because it is such a key area, and it really is great to be in Wales and see how Wales is making a difference. Now I've got Mark wanting to ask a question.
Well, sorry, I think Ros had her hand up before me, but perhaps I can just say before Ros has maybe the final word, but it's not really a question so much as a thank you, Eluned, for a very interesting exposition of where we are now, vis-a-vis the Welsh Government and the support for what's, you know, very, very important area of health this particular time. I myself have had an interest in mental health since about 1995. I'm a solicitor, and I was appointed to the Law Society's Mental Health Review Tribunal panel then. So I represented people who were detained in hospital. And latterly, I've had an interest in the local mind and been great supporter of the local mind, Brecon District Mind. I'm fortunate enough to be a trustee and recently appointed chair as well. So we cover the Brecon, Kirkowell, Talgoth and Hay areas. So it's quite a wide-ranging area. I notice you haven't been to see us, so you say. Can I extend it? Can I extend an invitation when things get back to normal for you to come and see us in Brecon? We'd be delighted to see you. This is being taped or recorded this session, so I'll be playing it at the next board meeting, which is a week Tuesday, to which Ros will be invited. By the way, Ros works for us, and she's absolutely fantastic. As she said, we have an interest in supporting children and young people, particularly at the moment. It's quite a recent innovation, really, but we've employed Ros specifically to do that, and she's also employed to help with Mum's Matter, and indeed there's a dad's support service as well. So there's a very wide-ranging support for the Mind Network in the locality. So if there's anyone who's suffering any mental health difficulties, then we'd be pleased to try and help them in any way that we can. So, but I suppose the messages, we're very, very thankful for the Welsh Government support in this area. I indeed am very thankful for the support of the local Labour Party as well, in donating the sum £150 or thereabouts to us locally. It'll be well spent, I can assure you of that. So I think Ros wanted to ask a question if she still wants to. I'm not sure.
We've got about 1 minute.
I'll make it really quick, and it kind of rounds it all off anyway. It's linking up with Marie's really moving question as well. That it's the whole message about how it actually, like you touched on, it saves money if we can really invest in mental health services and encourage open and honest discussions. And I suppose that's the frustration, and it was when I was a teacher, is just that the more that we can focus on prevention, the less money we end up spending. And with young people, all the evidence shows that young people that develop serious mental health problems, between 14 and 18, are more likely to suffer with those problems for the rest of their lives. So I suppose it's trying to communicate a compelling, clear argument, which I know you're doing already, Eluned, that it's actually cost effective in all areas of society to invest in mental health and to support mental health, and to create a culture that is really open and honest about mental health and well-being.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. It was a brilliant evening. Thank you.
Thank you again, everybody. Thank you for your time, Eluned, and